Hello and welcome. We're so glad that you've joined us. My name's Lee and this is Phil, and we've been part of Hemel Vineyard Church for a couple of years now. If today's the first time that you've joined us, we're going through a series at the moment based on John Mark Comer's book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. If you haven't yet got a copy, we encourage you to do so and read it for yourselves. There's a link available on the website for where you can purchase this.
So up until now, the book's really been focused on making the case, building the argument and the rationale for this different way of living. But the part of the book we're going to talk about today, between about pages 128 to 134, is all about the practice, about pursuing the way. Not the ethics, not the theology, but the way of Jesus. Now last week, James and Catherine introduced us to a practice, or rather to the four practices that JMC brings to life in the book, and focused in particular on silence and solitude. And we're going to spend a few minutes this morning reflecting on what it means, why it matters, and what it takes. Why don't we start there, Lou? What's this week been like for you?
Yeah, well, when I hear silence and solitude, it doesn't exactly fill me with joy. In fact, it doesn't sound very appealing to me at all, because I'm someone who likes to be around people. I like noise, I like socializing, and so it doesn't really naturally fit my personality type. Yet Jesus, who I do want to emulate, did this a lot. In fact, we read in Luke 5:16, Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. So we see this pattern, this rhythm of productivity and ministry, and then times of retreat and refreshment. And I read a tweet this week actually by a pastor in the US that said, "The striking thing about Jesus' life is just how often he withdrew to be alone, and also how much time he gave to people who were needy and could not help his movement in any significant way." So we see that silence and solitude is really a prerequisite for being able to pour out our lives, to be able to minister to others and to not get burnt out, to not feel constantly tired. So that's really been the challenge for me this week, to embrace silence and solitude, to see it as a regular sort of must-have in my week, and non-negotiable.
So I think this is a book that's full of simple practices that are hard to execute.
Yeah.
And many of the concepts that he talks about are exactly like that. They're simple to grasp, and silence and solitude, superficially, fairly straightforward. But I think it betrays the radical departure from everyday life, certainly our everyday life. You know, in a world where we're always connected, do any of us ever have to negotiate solitude? I don't think we do. It's just not part of life, even really life under lockdown. In a world that won't stop talking, do any of us experience silence? Probably not as much as I'd like. But John Mark Comer talks about two types of silence. He talks about external silence and all of the noise of the world, and internal silence and the quietening of our inner voice. The first of those, I think, is the easy one, external noise. And our world is never quiet. I remember the Buncefield oil explosion, and for a few hours after that, the birds were silent, and it was really eerie. It was clear that something had gone wrong in our world. Under lockdown, we're under the flight path from Luton, and the planes stopped, and we noticed their absence, and real silence doesn't happen in our natural world. And when we get close to it, it's kind of eerie and quite unusual. But there's an important truth, I think. There's something that really matters here. And designers talk about the way to communicate a message really clearly is all about the white space around the message or the image. It's not really about the image itself. And to my mind, the search for external silence is about that. It's about removing all of the stuff that interferes with us connecting and having a relationship with God. It's taking them off the page so that what's left is the stuff we really need. And it's easy, I guess, though, to conceive how we can dampen down the noise of the world. We can remove ourselves, we can put on headphones. But I think it's much harder, isn't it, to grasp inner silence. So what's the challenge there?
Absolutely. So John Mark Comer talks about internal noise as like an internal mental chatter that goes on constantly in our heads that never shuts up. It's like that running commentary in our head. And sometimes that internal noise is as simple as a to-do list, like, oh, I must email that person or take meat out the freezer for dinner. But sometimes it's more troubling. It's things like replaying a difficult conversation and thinking, oh, I wish I'd said that at that point. It's worrying about our health and thinking about that, or worrying about our children's schooling and playing out different scenarios. Sometimes it's just about daydreaming and thinking of a different life, idealizing something, or dreaming about something different. And that sort of internal chatter is going on constantly, and it can be really hard to dampen down.
So I know that on the rare occasions when I come to a place of quietness, it's that voice that I struggle with, the minute stuff that my brain just grabs onto. Yeah. I find it hard actually to get away from that. So I've found a practice called soaking prayer really useful, and it's just putting on some meditative Christian music without lyrics, and it just kind of distracts that part of my brain. Mm-hmm. Some people might find that if their hands don't have busy work, that's difficult, and so doing a slightly repetitive task, you're not applied to it, you're doing it to keep your hands or your brain busy, but you're freeing up your mind, I guess, and you're freeing up your emotions to engage. So the silence is difficult, but we understand how to do that. Solitude, I think, is clearly very closely linked, but it's also a deeply counter-cultural practice. Now more than ever, our working practices and the way we behave as a church are all built around collaboration, and social skills and the ability to engage in a team are much more highly prized than internal discipline and the considered world of thinking. Contemplation seems to have less of a place in modern day living, and I think it's why the deliberate removal of ourselves from transactional life, from the busy work, stepping out of the tasks and the obligations and the expectations is so subversive. It can feel like a luxury or an indulgence because there are always too many things to do for all of us. But John Mark Comer points out that our faith has got a long tradition of rest and reflection, and it's all driven out of biblical practice. And it's one of the practices or disciplines that's been squeezed out of everyday life. And that's why we have to squeeze ourselves out of everyday life and back into this pursuit of solitude, I guess. Crucially, it's, I think, when we step away from the business and the cadence of busyness, that's when we step into the rest that Jesus talks about.
Yeah. I was just thinking when you were talking about it feeling a bit indulgent, to remove ourselves and to have that time alone. Yes, it can be, but we need to focus on the purpose and the reason for doing that. And that famous verse in Psalm 46 talks about, be still and know that I am God. And so when we're still, we're putting down, we're stopping the frantic activity. And the whole purpose of that is so that we can be in awe of God, so that we can focus on Him and our relationship with Him and draw closer to Him.
So in each of the practices that John Mark Comer unpacks in the book, he kind of shares some tips and some tricks for new behaviours we can try out and ways to build new habits. So we'll get in a minute into feeling and listening prayer, which he introduces in this chapter. But Lou, you grapple with new habits, both professionally and personally. Why don't you sort of share some thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I guess some new habits can be hard to form, and one of the habits I was hoping to get into this year, or perhaps not hoping to get into, was going to the gym 3 times a week. And thankfully lockdown put a stop to that. But with my client work, I do a lot of work with clients, helping them to form new behaviours or new habits. And I often encourage them that the research shows that it takes us on average 66 days of doing a particular behaviour before it will become a habit, before it becomes something that is comfortable and perhaps a bit more natural for us. So I guess that's an encouragement for us as well, that this discipline is going to take time and we need to persevere. And the research sort of around habit formation also shows that if you miss doing this behaviour, on the odd occasion, it doesn't mean that you're not going to succeed in forming a habit. So we need to take that as encouragement as well, that there's grace in this, that we might not be able to achieve this every day, but it's about the pursuit of doing this, and that over time, if we continue with that, it will become a habit.
Yeah, we've got to start by getting started. We can't fail
Absolutely.
in doing this. So last week we touched on breathing prayer, and today we're just going to touch on feeling and listening prayer. Now, it's a really simple 4-step exercise, but it's all about recognizing that emotions aren't something to avoid or deny in the time that we're chasing God. This isn't a theoretical or theological experience we're after. This is bringing all of us to meet all of Him. And so, emotions are a new place to open up to God, I guess, and to be more authentic in that. So the process that Coma outlines sort of starts with establishing a place of silence and solitude. So let's remove ourselves from the busyness. Slip on a set of headphones or go somewhere where we can still ourselves and be quiet. The second stage he calls feeling. It's very similar to what some of us would know as a mindfulness practice. And it's recognizing that we bring into this process a whole bunch of emotions and feelings and thoughts and presumptions, and these aren't to be suppressed. Let's kind of let them come up. Let's take the time to recognize them, name them. They might be positive or negative, but these feelings and emotions are there. And either we're bringing them into the conversation with God, and that's a really helpful prompt for where we might want to go in prayer, or it's an opportunity for God to surface things with us. So again, taking this time to take a beat, to establish and understand our feelings, it is the really interesting part of this process. So that's stage 2. Then, prayer, number 3, is really about leaning in authentically, pressing into the stuff that you're grappling with, not just good, diligent prayer, which of course is important and has its place, but this is about engaging emotionally and pressing into the stuff that's hurting us or worrying us or exciting us, the stuff that's been surfaced, I guess, earlier in the process. And then finally, stage 4 is about listening, and that's about making sure that we invite God to speak actively into our life, to speak into these emotions, to speak into the circumstance and the context that sits behind those feelings. So, simple practices to kickstart some new behaviours and habits. We've got to just get into them, try them out. I'm sure that we'll be discussing them more in our Connect groups during the week. So that's it from us. I think we'll hand back to James and Catherine.
Hi guys, it's so good to have you this morning, whether it be on Facebook or on Zoom. We are Hemel Vineyard Church, and we're just doing life together as we follow Jesus. If you want to be part of that journey, then feel free to come and join us, whether it be on Zoom, again on Facebook next week, or drop us a line and have a conversation with us. We'd love to hear from you. Another place you can find out what's going on would be to check out our website, which is www.hemelvineyard.org.uk. I pray this week that you would know Jesus' love and His presence with you in whatever you face. See you next week. Bye.